Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the all-new Nissan Juke. The first generation Juke was a massive success for the Japanese brand, and it was easy to see why. We had this cute little crossover that looked different to anything else out there, and it was really affordable. In fact, Nissan sold over 1 million units of the first generation. However, it wasn't perfect. I mean, yes, it wasn't the most practical of cars, and the interior was a bit plasticky. Now, for this second generation, Nissan have looked to rectify those issues. And well, I've had this second generation Juke for a week, and I'm going to let you know, well, if they have or not. Now, when it comes to this latest generation Juke styling, Nissan have clearly gone on the basis of, well, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. I mean, yes, instantly looking at it, you can tell it's the new Nissan Juke. However, with the first generation looking very cutesy and toyish, it looked a little bit immature. But with this latest generation, well, it actually kind of means business. I mean, it's got a bit of a menacing stance about it, and it wouldn't look out of place in the business centre car park. And it's got the same combination of curves and angles that we've seen in the latest generation of Qashqai. And I think Nissan are onto a winner. I mean, they're onto a winner again, I should say. But it really does stand out. And with this Techno Plus, we have got the two-tone paint scheme. We've got those very distinctive and attractive looking 19-inch alloy wheels. But we'll get onto the ride later on in the review. But all in all, it's actually still a very good looking car. It's going to be an instant hit again for Nissan. I mean, it's been out for a couple of years already, and I'm seeing them everywhere. But it's just a case of, yep, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. But let's just make this new Juke look a little bit more sophisticated. And yeah, and I think that's enough of looking at the exterior of the new Nissan Juke. Let's see what they've done with the interior. Sat in the front of this new Juke, you are greeted by a very comfortable and a much more aesthetically pleasing interior, especially when it comes to the perceived quality. If you sat in a first generation Juke and then you sit in this second generation Juke, you'll definitely feel like this is a much more upmarket car. Now, of course, this being a little crossover means that you have got a slightly raised seating position, so getting in and out of the Juke is actually really easy, and the doors open pretty wide. So if you have got any kind of mobility issues, then this is definitely one little crossover to consider. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are very comfortable. They do actually hold a bear in place, and there is a good amount of adjustment. Just be aware that it's manual adjustment only, and also with the steering, where we have both rake and reach adjustments, so getting the perfect driving position is easy. Interior quality has also taken a big step forward, especially when compared to the first generation Juke. Now, we've got quite a lot of kind of faux suede in here. We got it here on the dashboard, on the center console, and also here on the door panels. And actually, the big surprise is further up on the dash. We've even got soft touch plastics. However, on top of the doors, it is cheap, hard, nasty plastic. So what I would say to Nissan is I'd happily sacrifice that soft plastic and put it here on the doors instead, especially if you're on a long journey, because you want to lean your arm there on the windowsill. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, lower down, we have got some hard, scratchy plastic, but we've also got some piano black plastic, but that actually feels of a really sturdy quality. And all in all, it actually feels well screwed together in here in this new Juke, which is a real pleasant surprise. Cubby spaces in the new Juke are actually pretty good as well. We got some very decent sized door pockets. Now, they're not lined with fabric, so loose items will rattle around in there, but you can get a medium to large size bottle of drink in there, so that is actually really impressive. Now, ahead of the gear lever, we have got a little cubby space where you can put your mobile phone, but it's just millimeters too small to put my phone in there flush. But it does sit in there quite nicely, and it's not fallen out if I've gone around any corners with a bit of enthusiasm. And just above there, we have got a USB-A charging input. We've also got an aux-in socket, and we've also got a 12-volt socket as well. So we can have a couple of items there charging away whilst you're driving. Then behind the gear lever, we have got two little cup holders. I say little, they are of a decent size, and they do seem to be shaped quite differently. So you could put two different types of coffee cup in there, or perhaps a thermos, and it will hold them in place. Then just behind there, we have got your center armrest, and if I lift that up, we've got a little bit of additional cubby space. It's not lined with any fabric, but it is actually quite handy. although some rivals do have slightly larger compartments there. And then finally we have got the glove box, which is of a decent size. It does look a little bit deceptive because you have to look at the pocket area of the glove box, which is actually not too bad, but the book pack does take up a bit of space in there, so that's just something to be aware of. And again, it's not lined with any fabric. So when it comes to the cubby spaces, I'm actually really impressed here in the new Nissan Juke. Now, Nissan haven't gone the way just yet of having a lot of the functions controlled via a central touchscreen. In fact, we do have a lot of physical buttons in here still, which is actually a really nice, pleasant surprise. So just underneath the infotainment system, we have got some shortcut buttons and a couple of rotary knobs. Then just below these center vents, we have got your single zone climate control, but it is all physical buttons, and I do actually like the tactility of the rotary knobs there and the buttons there as well. And we do also on this Techno Plus get a heated windscreen, so that is pretty plush. Then just behind there, or should I say on here on the center console, we have got your engine start button, and then just behind the gear lever we have got your drive mode select, your electric handbrake and auto hold button. Then we have got a plethora of buttons here on the steering wheel, and on the right hand side we got a couple of buttons here that operate the engine start stop and also your trip reset button. So there's a nice mixture of buttons here in the cabin that ergonomically, it does feel actually really nicely laid out, which is a blessing. And yeah, it's quite nice to not have everything operated via the touchscreen. And as I said as well, there is actually a nice tactility to the buttons in here, and they do actually feel of a good quality. Again, I am pleasantly surprised. And one thing I do like in here is the fact we've got 3 center vents, kind of reminiscent of the Audi TT, but I do really like them, and it's quite nice to have actually all 3 fans blowing in my direction if I haven't got a passenger next to me, because as you can tell, yeah, it is quite warm today. I think it's actually touching 30 degrees centigrade. Whew, that's a hot day. Now when it comes to the infotainment system, we've got an 8-inch touchscreen display that's set high up on the dashboard, and as I mentioned, you have got some shortcut buttons underneath along with a couple of rotary knobs. And the display itself is actually really nice. It's actually quite colourful. The graphics are not as sharp as some of its rivals, but the menus are easy to use when on the move and pretty intuitive. You have got things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The only thing I would say is that some rivals out there do have larger touchscreens, so it's kind of a sad thing to say that in 2022, 8 inches just simply isn't big enough anymore. Us customers and consumers want bigger. But as I said, it is nice and easy to use, and you have got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Then in front of the steering wheel, we have got 2 analog dials, one for your rev counter, the other for your speedometer. And then in the center, we've got a 7-inch digital dashboard display, and that provides you with all your driving data. So now you can operate that using the left-hand side of the steering wheel controls, where you've also got your audio and media controls. And then on the right-hand side, we have got your adaptive cruise and driver aid assist, and also got your communication controls there. And it is actually really easy to use when on the move, and that is something I do like about the Juke. It's also something I came across in the Qashqai as well. So all in all, sat here in the new Nissan Juke, it is a big improvement over the Mark 1. It definitely feels like a more premium feeling car compared to the predecessor. And on this Techno Plus, I do love the fact that we have got a Bose sound system, and we even have speakers in the headrests. That is a very quirky feature. So yeah, it's a big improvement over its Mark 1. But now it's time we sit in those back seats and see if there's any improvements there. Sat in the back of the Nissan Juke, it is actually surprisingly spacious back here, but of course it's not going to be as spacious as some of the proper SUVs out there. Now that driver's seat has been set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a little bit of knee room here, and headroom is not too bad either. However, if you are 6 foot tall, you will start to feel quite claustrophobic in here because your head will be rubbing against the ceiling, and we've got that dark headlining there. So it is really more ideal for kids back here. Now, speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, but what I love is that we have got this plastic cover, which is actually not removable. You just lift it up and it exposes the ISOFIX bar under there. And what I love as well is that the front passenger seat also has ISOFIX support as well. So that is really handy. Now when it comes to cubby spaces, again, it's not too bad back here. We've got some decent sized door pockets where you can get a large bottle of drink in there. We've got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats, but sadly, we've got no armrests to pull down with any additional cup holders. But we have got a little cubby space here where you can rest your phone and you can charge it using the one USB-A input there. So that is pretty handy. And then when it comes to the windows, they are of a decent size, but because of that coupe shape, they're a little bit narrower again than some of their more traditional SUV rivals, and they only open around about 90% of the way down. So that's a little bit disappointing, but it's enough still to just rest your arm on. But other than that, yeah, I actually think it's surprisingly spacious back here. It is more suitable for kids, but yeah, I'd be fine back here for I'd say a medium length journey. And on that note, I think it's enough of looking at the back seats of the Juke. Let's see what it's like in the boot. Opening the boot on the Nissan Juke presents you with 422 litres of space, which is actually really impressive for this class of car. And what I like as well is that you do get a variable boot floor, so in its highest setting you've got virtually no load lip. However, you can lower it down if you want to get more items into the boot of your Juke. However, it's lacking in a few features. So we have got some tethering hooks, which are really handy, but we've got no 12-volt socket. And underneath the lower boot floor, we have got a bit of additional space where we can clearly store a space saver spare wheel. Now, what I will mention as well is that if you do have the boot in its highest position and you do put the rear seats down, you have an almost completely flat load area, which is actually really handy. And what I like as well is that you can store the parcel shelf underneath the boot floor, so you don't have to leave it at the garage. But other than that, yeah, it's actually a surprisingly practical little car, this new Juke, and yeah, should be perfect for families, or if you fancy going on a weekend away and chucking a couple of suitcases in the back. And on that note, I think it's time that we stop looking at the boot of the new Juke and we see what it's like to drive. So once you get driving in the new Nissan Juke, first impressions are really positive. It definitely feels a big step up over the Mark 1 Juke. And if you've driven a Mark 1 Juke and you jump into this one, it feels like a more substantial car. You feel like you're surrounded by a bit more metal and it feels a bit safer in that regard. Gone is that kind of slightly cheap feel because of the interior plastics in here. It does feel, like I said, like a much more premium grown-up car. And of course, because this is a crossover and we got that slightly raised seating position, it does mean that all-round visibility is pretty good. I got a great view of the road ahead. Granted, you can't see the tops of the lights like you could do in the first generation. The A-pillars are quite thick, but I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions. The wing mirrors are of a decent size and they have got blind spot monitoring on this Tecna Plus. And if I look over my shoulder, I do find, of course, because this is a kind of coupe crossover design, you have got quite a thick C-pillar. So as I mentioned, we have got blind spot monitoring, and then finally rear visibility is absolutely fine. I've got no complaints whatsoever, and the headrests don't obstruct any of your view. So all in all, when you get driving in the new Juke, it does feel like a much better car than its predecessor, and it definitely feels now like a true rival to cars like the Toyota CHR. Now, this particular version won't be a true rival to it. You'll be having to look at the hybrid version of the Juke. But when it comes to kind of size and everything, yeah, they are pretty big rivals. Now, there are 5 trim levels to choose from in the Juke range. You've got the entry-level Vitia, you then have the Ascenta, the N Connector, the Tecna, and then the Tecna Plus, which is what I've got here. Now, personally, there are 2 trim levels I would go for. Now, the first one would be the N Connector, and that would be because of the fact you get 17-inch alloy wheels, which means you will have improved ride quality. If you go for the Tecna and the Tecna Plus, you get 19-inch alloy wheels, and as lovely as the designs on them are, I mean, they are very striking alloy designs, they're just not going to do much for you when it comes to ride quality. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, the second trim level I would recommend then would actually be the Tecna, not the Tecna Plus, because you pretty much get everything you want as standard along with the N Connector. But if you're happy to go for those larger alloy wheels, then by all means that would be the one to go for. But if you value ride comfort, go for the end connector. If you don't mind having a slightly firmer ride and a slightly bouncier ride, then go for the Tecna. Because even with these petrol engines, they're still great value for money. It's only when you go to the hybrid that you do have to pay a little bit more. Now, when it comes to engines in the Nissan Juke range, excluding the hybrid, there's only one available, and it's a 1 litre turbocharged petrol unit producing 112 brake horsepower. Now, you can either have that mated to a 6-speed manual, which is what I've got here, or a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. But with 112 brake horsepower, yes, the performance statistics are not exactly going to set your hair on fire. So 0 to 60 takes 10.7 seconds. However, it doesn't feel like it takes 10.7 seconds. It actually feels like it takes a bit longer, because yes, you got that little turbo in the engine, but you do get a lot of lag if you're in the wrong gear. So you do find yourself changing gear quite a bit. And then when you do want to kind of accelerate, you just find I'm moving, but I just don't feel I'm moving that quickly, which is a little bit disappointing. But if you go for the hybrid version, you do get more performance and you get even more efficiency as well. But going back to this internal combustion engine only version of the Juke, yes, the performance is not going to set your hair on fire. Let me just turn him off. And as a result, yeah, it's not a sporty car. Also, though, as well, it does, in the positive side, become quite frugal. Now, Nissan say I should get around 45 mpg on a combined cycle, and that's with a WLTP cycle as well. But I've been getting more than that. I've actually been getting around 48 mpg, which is actually really impressive, but I've just not been able to crack that elusive 50 mpg, which is a little bit disappointing, but I have been trying. And consistency has definitely been the key with this car. I've been getting around 48.6 mpg pretty much daily on my commute to work, which is really impressive. So it's nice to know I can better what Nissan say. But yeah, if you are expecting sportiness from the Nissan Juke when you get driving it, you're not going to get it from the engine performance. It's just not going to overwhelm you at all. And you do kind of wish that on this latest generation Juke that Nissan did come up with a Nismo version, because when it gets to the handling side, it is much better. So as I mentioned with the gearboxes, there is a 6-speed manual, which is what I've got, and a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. Now, the manual is okay. It's fine for everyday usage. It's not the slickest of gearboxes, and it seems to be when you go into the odd numbers, it seems to feel like a short shift, but when you go into the even numbers, like 2nd, 4th and 6th gear, it just seems to be quite long in its throw. So again, it takes away from that kind of sporty feel that perhaps Nissan wanted from the Juke. But if they did, then you definitely haven't got it with this gearbox. Now, I've not driven the Juke with the 7-speed DCT, but it would possibly be my recommendation to go for, because it would be a bit more relaxing. It'd be perfect if you're perhaps stuck in traffic every day. And as much as I love a manual gearbox, this isn't the nicest one to use. I mean, yeah, it's just not the slickest. But like I said, it's fine for everyday use. So what's the ride refinement and handling like in the new Juke? Well, ride-wise, I've already kind of mentioned what it's like in here, and especially when it came to recommending trim levels. So with this Tecna Plus, I have got 19-inch alloy wheels. So the ride for the most part, I say, is okay. I mean, it's fine for everyday driving. It's not like a sporty car. You don't feel uncomfortable, but it is quite fidgety at low speed. If you go through any potholes or manhole covers at low speed, because of those larger alloy wheels, yes, you do hear the bangs and kind of booms coming into the cabin. So that's just something to be aware of, and it can feel a little bit unsettled and a bit fidgety at low speed, as you can probably tell from me bouncing around a bit. However, if it's a nice smooth road surface, it's really lovely. And that's again why I recommended the N connector, because you get 17-inch alloy wheels rather than the 19s. But when you speed up, we'll get there eventually, the ride, it does become a bit more settled, but there is still this kind of twitchiness and slight nervousness about the ride on there. Now, the good thing is, because of the seats and how comfy they are, they do take a bit of the vibration and bumps and the sting out of that kind of imperfections on the road out before they get to you. So as I said, it's not uncomfortable. You can do a long drive in the Juke, but there are slightly more comfortable cars out there. Something like the Toyota CHR just deals with the bumps and imperfections a bit more maturely than the Juke. But other than that, like I said, for everyday driving, you'll have no real issues with it. And if you were happy with the Mark 1 Juke's ride quality, then you will be happy with the Mark 2s, because they do feel, in a way, quite similar by having that slightly fidgety ride to them. Now, something I do really like in the Juke are the refinement levels, because this is a surprisingly refined car to drive. And even though we've got those 19-inch alloy wheels, yes, you can hear a bit of tyre roar coming into the cabin. It's not as bad as I was expecting it to be. In fact, I am actually really impressed by it. And as I put my foot down and we go a bit faster, we will get there, I can't hear the engine. And I've just gone from 4th to 6th gear there, so the engine was revving quite a bit. Couldn't hear the engine, and the only intrusion I got now is a bit of wind noise coming from the A-pillar and the wing mirror. But the tyre roar isn't there. But even the wing mirror and the A-pillar, even the wind noise, isn't that intrusive. This is another area where I said the Juke could do a long journey and you would feel not as kind of worn out as you probably would be if, yeah, a little bit of road noise, if you were in something that was a bit more sporty in its setup. So yeah, I'm actually really impressed with the refinement of the Juke. And then finally comes the handling. So because the ride is quite firm and the suspension setup is quite firm as well, it does mean that when it comes to cornering in the Juke, it does stay pretty planted. There's hardly any lean or roll in the corners, and I am genuinely impressed by that. The only trade-off being is the fact of, yes, the ride quality is sacrificed a bit. And also there's I'll say a decent amount of feedback coming through the steering wheel. So I do know what the front tyres are doing, but if you push the Juke, you do get the impression it will kind of, yeah, it will want to let go. It's not a sporty little crossover. Even though it does actually feel like it's been set up to be one, it doesn't give you the same kind of rewards that something like a Volkswagen T-Cross will give you. And it hasn't got the comfort levels of something like a Skoda Kamiq. But like I said, if you've owned the Mark 1 Juke, you don't care about those other cars because you want the Mark 2 and you're not going to be disappointed. Again, the handling is absolutely fine. It's great for everyday driving. The steering has got a nice bit of weight to it, but at the same time it's light enough so it makes it an absolute doddle to park. So yeah, when it comes to the handling side of the Juke, I'm surprised by how kind of level it is through the corners, but it's not a truly rewarding or sporty little crossover. So what have been some of the highlights and some of the low points I've experienced living with the Nissan Juke? Well, high points have definitely been the comfort levels. It's a very comfortable car to be in. Yes, when you're driving to work, you can feel those little bumps and imperfections, and the ride quality is not as good as some of its rivals, but I've still been very comfortable. I've loved the Bose speakers in the headrest. They've actually been a really nice dynamic to listen to, especially on my daily commute. And I've also been really impressed with the technology in the car. We have got Nissan's ProPilot system fitted to the Juke, and I have said with the Nissan Qashqai, it's arguably one of the best kind of driver aid systems or driver aid packs you can have fitted to a car. It just works really, really well. It's very safe and intuitive, but that's on the Nissan Qashqai, because one of the things I have experienced with the Juke is that the lane keep assist and the driver assist in conjunction with themselves, sometimes they turn off. Now I expect that to happen in a lot of cars, and in most cars, if it can't see the white lines, it'll turn itself off. But I constantly get reminded with this little bing bong kind of coming into the cabin, and it's kind of, okay, that's fine. I don't mind if you can't see the lines, you just don't have to let me know. Now there probably is a menu, then a sub menu where I can possibly turn that off, but on a couple of the roads that I'm driving on to get to work, there have been roadworks intermittently happening on them where they're doing some resurfacing. So as I'm driving along, I go onto this part of the road that's being resurfaced and I get a bing bong. I get onto a normal bit of road, it then gets back on working, but you don't hear a bing bong. I then go onto another bit of resurfaced road, I get a bing bong. And you're just kind of like, oh God, I need to find another way to work. Or quite simply, you can turn the system off. But I do like using the adaptive cruise, so that is something I really do like. But that's only a minor niggle. I mean, it's just, it's a safety aid basically saying it can't do its job because, the white lines aren't there. But that's really been my only niggle in the Juke. I mean, it's surprisingly well screwed together up here up front. I've not had any major kind of creaks or rattles because this particular car is coming up to 3 years old and nearly 10,000 miles. But yeah, it still drives like new. It feels very well screwed together. It does feel like a nice piece of metal surrounding me. I would just like to see this gearbox just get a little bit sharper and a little bit shorter in its throws. So what are my thoughts on the new Nissan Juke? Well, I'm going to be upfront. I was never really a big fan of the first generation. Despite its success, I didn't really feel it was a car that was going to appeal to me, and as I mentioned, it kind of appealed to young families and mums who perhaps want their own car and something very cute and quirky to transport their kids in. But with this latest generation, they've definitely got it right with the looks. It looks a lot more sophisticated, it looks a lot more grown up, but at the same time it still has that slightly cutesy element that we had with the first generation, albeit kind of more really in the shape of the car rather than in the fine details. Then we've got the ride quality and the interior quality, which have all taken a big step forward, and as a result we've got a more grown up car. And the good news is as well is that the price hasn't gone up hugely either. I mean, starting at just over £20,000, that's actually really impressive for this type of car. Now granted, yes, this is a top of the range Techno Plus, but you do get an awful lot of kit for your money. And I love the fact that, yes, even with this Techno Plus, it's not going to cost the earth. You've got a frugal engine in there, but we just need a bit more power, hence why we now have the hybrid. But yeah, you've got a great all-round small little crossover. And with a world now where we have got a few rivals to deal with, I mean, we've got a load from Volkswagen Group, I mean, there's 2 from Volkswagen, Skoda, Seat, etc. We got the likes of the Toyota CHR, but that's more of a hybrid now. There really is a car out there for everyone, and for those who loved the first generation Juke, they won't be disappointed with this new generation. So yeah, the new Nissan Juke, and I don't know if you can hear any vibrations going off, but that's the lane keep assist warning me that I'm straying out of the lane, but there's actually no white lines here. So anyway, yeah, sorry, this new generation Juke just does everything that the first car did, but just much better and much more grown up as a result. So it's a great little crossover, and it definitely needs to be considered if you are after this type of car. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the new Nissan Juke. As always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Of course, if you've got any questions about the Nissan Juke and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. And of course, don't forget to follow me on social media like Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, etc. for additional content. But in the meantime, guys, I hope you all stay well, stay safe, and I'll catch you all in the next video. So take care, everybody, and bye-bye.